A millionaire on his way home made a quick stop at a highway McDonald's. While waiting for his order, he suddenly heard soft whimpers coming from the restroom. Intrigued, he followed the sound and clearly heard the delicate sobs of a little girl. He slammed the door open with his shoulder and stood absolutely frozen at the horrifying scene before him.
Now settle in and let this story wrap around you in a soothing way.
I truly hope it serves as the perfect catalyst for a night of restful sleep. And here we go.
Have you ever witnessed something that changed your life forever? What would you do if you heard a child crying for help in a public place? Drop a comment below and let me know. I read every single one. By the way, if you're new here, hit that subscribe button because this story will take you on an emotional journey you won't forget.
It was late on a cold afternoon, and the setting sun cast a thin layer of gold across the highway,
reflecting intensely on the windshields of cars speeding past.
Michael Thornton pulled over to the side of the interstate. The iconic golden arches of McDonald's emitted a warm glow across his face. His luxury SUV remained outside while he entered, shoulders slightly tense after a marathon day. In his hands, he carried a small wooden box, a gift from the children at Beacon House, a detail that had made him chuckle the entire drive home, but now left him with a strange sense of emptiness. The place was packed. The aroma of French fries mixed with the sizzle of deep fryers, and the combination of laughter and order calls created a constant, impersonal yet completely ordinary rhythm. At the counter stood Margaret Wilson,
a robust middle-aged woman with a tight bun and an expression as serious as stone, supervising every employee.
She adjusted the watch on her wrist, giving a signal to the young man at the register beside her. Jake Rivers, only 24 years old, was quick but slightly clumsy. He had just spilled a customer's drink. He offered a quick, embarrassed smile, then bent down to clean up the mess, avoiding Margaret's annoyed glare. Jake knew she was a difficult woman, but the way she treated people always rubbed him the wrong way. Still, Jake stayed quiet. He needed this job. Michael settled into a corner booth where the menu light illuminated his face, his cream-colored suit standing out against the red plastic seating. He gently stirred his coffee, his gaze lost in the fogged window glass. Everything outside was turning muted shades of gray. He opened the wooden box, observing the handwritten inscription. "Thank you for giving us a safe foundation." "Thank you." The small, shaky letters brought back memories of tiny faces and the bright, resonant laughter in the center's courtyard. A warmth spread through his chest, but it was fleeting because he knew that behind every act of generosity, a nameless loneliness often hid. Think about the last time you gave something without expecting anything in return. How did it make you feel? I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. Near the back of the restaurant, close to the rear exit, a tiny figure was huddled, a little girl, perhaps 6 years old, with braided brown hair tangled by the wind and a worn oversized jacket covering what looked like a faded bright sapphire blue dress underneath. Her large hazel eyes stared through the glass at customers eating, her gaze a mixture of hunger and fear. She stood there for a good while, then timidly entered, moving as light as a feather. No one noticed her except Michael. He watched her and immediately recognized that look of helplessness. The girl stopped in front of the counter, her eyes fixed on the warm apple pies behind the glass. But before the cashier could even ask, Margaret appeared. She looked at the girl as if she were a nuisance, walked quickly, and grabbed the girl's arm, pulling hard. "Get out of here! This isn't a shelter for you." The girl flinched. Her lip trembled as she tried to break free, her small hands clutching at her sapphire blue dress beneath the jacket. Some customers turned to look. Jake looked up, about to say something, but Margaret's glare paralyzed him. She pushed the girl toward the door, her face tight with impatience. Michael set down his coffee, his cream suit catching the light as he stood. His movements were slow, deliberate. He stood up, leaving the wooden box on the table and followed her. He wasn't sure what he planned to do, only that something felt very wrong. From his position, he could see the girl's small shoulders shake each time the woman tightened her grip. The bathroom door slammed shut. A few customers turned their heads. Michael quickened his pace, the light reflecting on the white tile floor and his pristine cream-colored suit.
But he stopped when he heard the faint, thin sound echoing, a stifled sob, a lost plea. "I'm sorry. I just wanted a little piece of pie." If you saw this happening right in front of you, what would you do? Would you intervene or walk away? Let me know in the comments. Your answer might surprise you. All noise in his mind stopped. That single phrase brought back memories of a rainy night. When he was 10 years old, the night he was left at the side of the road, clutching a bag of stale cookies, shivering as he waited for someone to return.
No one did. Michael clenched his fist, the fabric of his cream suit stretching across his knuckles, then opened the door with a loud bang. The door burst open. In the cold white light, the girl was huddled on the floor, her braided brown hair covering her tear-stained face, her bright sapphire blue dress torn at the hem, next to a shattered piece of plastic tray. Margaret stood over her, face flushed, one hand clenched around the girl's wrist. Michael said not a word. He simply walked forward, his cream-colored suit a stark contrast to the cold bathroom tiles, and gently pulled the girl toward him. She instinctively curled against him, her sapphire blue dress pressing against his cream suit, her whole body trembling. He bent slightly, shielding her small figure with his back, his undercut hairstyle catching the harsh light, his eyes fixed on the woman.
The air solidified. Jake appeared in the doorway, hesitant. Some other employees stood behind him, uncertain of what was happening.
Margaret stepped back, then spoke quickly. "This is a misunderstanding.
This girl is my ex-husband's daughter.
She's a runaway, a little thief.
I was just trying to take her home."
No one responded. Michael looked down, seeing the girl clutch his cream-colored jacket tightly, her small fingers gripping the fine fabric. He gently placed his palm on her shoulder, never taking his eyes off Margaret. Jake took a deep breath, gathering his courage. "She's not telling the truth.
I've seen this girl around here several times, always hiding behind the dumpster.
She's never caused any trouble." Margaret turned, her voice sharp. But Michael raised a hand to stop her. He spoke softly. "I think we should call the local police.
Let them sort the situation out." A heavy silence fell over the small room. Have you ever had to stand up for someone who couldn't stand up for themselves? That moment of courage can change everything.
If this story is touching your heart, please hit that like button. It helps me share these important stories with more people. Jake nodded, pulling out his phone. Some curious customers watched from the entrance. The girl looked up, her braided brown hair falling away from her face, eyes filled with tears, meeting Michael's gaze, a gaze that was calm, warm, and completely brave. Her sapphire blue dress was wrinkled and damp from tears. The sound of police sirens echoed in the distance. Footsteps and the static buzz of a radio grew louder with each passing second. Margaret stood still, her lips pressed into a thin line. The police sirens still wailed in the parking lot when two officers entered. The flashing lights reflected on the white tile floor, making everyone pause. Margaret stood in the lobby, hands clasped tightly together, her face tense. Michael still held the girl, his cream-colored suit jacket almost completely covering her small shoulders and bright sapphire blue dress. One officer approached, taking notes quickly while the other asked some initial questions. Margaret responded immediately, speaking rapidly,
claiming that Emma was her ex-husband's daughter and had been away from home for months.
She insisted the girl was troubled, often showing up begging, and was damaging the establishment's reputation. Jake stood nearby, unable to stay silent. He stepped forward, still holding his phone with the camera recording, trying to clearly state that he'd seen Emma around the place many times, always hungry and shivering. But the officer just nodded without writing anything down. Some curious customers watched from a distance, whispering. The atmosphere was tense, like a rope about to snap. Michael listened in silence, his cream suit somehow maintaining its dignity despite the chaos. When the crowd began to disperse, he spoke with a calmness that drew the officer's attention. He pointed to the girl, her sapphire blue dress now visible as his jacket shifted, and asked if they could take her to a safe place where she could receive a medical checkup.
A decent meal, and a bed to rest in. The officer nodded, saying they would temporarily take Emma to the city's social services center before attempting to locate a legal guardian. What would you do if you were in Michael's shoes right now? Would you get involved or let the system handle it?
Drop your thoughts below. I'm genuinely curious to hear your perspective. Michael knelt beside Emma,
His cream suit contrasting beautifully with her bright,
sapphire blue dress as he gently adjusted his jacket around her small shoulders.
The girl looked at him, her braided brown hair framing her face, her lips dry, her eyes red.
He placed his hand on her shoulder and simply said, "You're okay now. You're safe."
She didn't respond, only offered a small nod, her small hands clutching the fabric of his cream suit. Her small shoulders still trembled slightly. As the police car pulled out of the parking lot,
he watched until the red taillights disappeared around the curve,
his cream suit glowing in the fading light. Inside, the employees had returned to work, but Jake hadn't left. He approached, hesitant. "I'm worried, Mr. Thornton. That girl, it wasn't the first time that woman did something like that." Michael simply nodded, his undercut hairstyle neat despite the evening's chaos, responding quietly, "I know." Then he turned, his cream-colored suit catching the restaurant lights as he left Jake alone in the restaurant lobby, where the smell of boiling oil and the sound of the grill resumed as if nothing had happened. That night, when Michael returned to Beacon House, a light rain was falling. He stopped his car outside the center's gate, his cream suit slightly dampened by the mist, looking through the iron fence where hallway lights spilled out. Some children were still awake, playing with building blocks in the common room. That familiar warmth provided some relief, but the image of the girl's frightened eyes and sapphire blue dress still haunted him. He called the center's social coordinator, requesting temporary support to admit Emma that very night, before standard procedures were completed. An hour later, they brought Emma in. She sat on the old leather couch in the office, wrapped in a blanket, her bright sapphire blue dress peeking out,
her braided brown hair now neatly arranged, clutching a broken watch with both hands.
Before we continue, please take a moment to leave a comment about this story and rate it from 1 to 10. How are you feeling? If there's anything you'd like to share, I'm always here to listen. I hope you find a moment of peace and reflection
as you follow this healing story and its journey of courage and justice. The on-call doctor examined her quickly, noting in her file that she was malnourished and showed signs of prolonged starvation. Small bruises on her wrists were covered with bandages. When the doctor left, Michael remained seated, his cream suit jacket draped over a nearby chair, watching every breath the girl took. He felt a wave of indignation, but held it back. Not for anyone else, but for fear of scaring her even more. It was almost dawn. Emma sat in the wooden chair, her bright sapphire blue dress now clean and pressed, staring at a pile of temporary guardianship application papers on the table. In the hallway, rain continued to fall steadily. When he stood and walked past the living room, Emma had fallen asleep on the couch, her head tilted to one side, her braided brown hair spread across the pillow, still clutching the watch, her sapphire dress glowing softly in the lamplight. He bent down, gently pulling the blanket over her, covering her sapphire blue dress, and whispered, "Daddy." She stirred slightly, murmuring in her sleep, "Daddy." The next morning, when Michael opened the window, already dressed in his cream-colored suit with his undercut hairstyle freshly groomed, the day's first ray of sunshine entered the room. The morning newspaper was outside the gate. On the local news page, a short headline read, "Man rescues little girl at highway McDonald's." A blurry photo captured the moment he stood in the restaurant, his cream suit distinctive, his hand protecting Emma in her sapphire blue dress. The news spread quickly, shared on social media with many praising his action. But Michael felt no pleasure in it. Every word of praise only made his heart feel heavier. Do you think social media attention helps or hurts situations like this? I've seen it go both ways. Let me know what you think in the comments. At the McDonald's, the atmosphere was completely different. Margaret was temporarily suspended from her job. Employees whispered among themselves, some defending her, others afraid. Jake submitted his resignation, unable to bear the feeling of having stayed silent for too long. As he left the restaurant, Margaret only watched, her eyes cold as steel. That afternoon, she received a call from Howard Pierce, the franchise owner. He didn't want the incident to escalate. The chain's reputation was paramount. Howard said he would help manage the situation, and Margaret understood that meant finding someone to blame. She seized the opportunity, telling the story her way that Michael had overreached, exploiting the situation to promote his charity center. Meanwhile, Beacon House remained peaceful. Emma began to open up. During her first lunch, she sat in her bright sapphire blue dress, now clean and vibrant, eating slowly, silently, but no longer seemed frightened. When meeting the other children, Sandra, the center's manager, put a hand on her shoulder, assuring her that no one would hurt her there ever. Every night they read her stories, and she learned to write her name with a brand new pencil, still wearing her beloved sapphire blue dress. Michael often checked her room after everyone was asleep, his cream suit jacket loosened after the long day, just to make sure she was safe and sound. A week later, Emma felt confident enough to tell her story. She sat at a table, her bright sapphire blue dress smoothed down, her small legs with braided brown hair swinging, speaking softly, phrase by phrase. Her father, David Hayes, was a construction engineer, a kind man who had lost his life in a car accident 6 months earlier. Her biological mother had passed away when she was very young, leaving only her stepmother, Margaret. After her father's death, Margaret gradually changed, often leaving the house, leaving Emma to fend for herself. Many nights she had to sleep on the porch in her thin sapphire blue dress. And when she was too hungry, she secretly went to McDonald's to ask for leftovers. As she spoke, her voice broke and she twisted her hands in her lap, her sapphire dress wrinkling. Michael sat across from her in his cream-colored suit, saying nothing. Old memories resurfaced, memories of his own childhood, as a boy who had to survive alone after his parents died. He realized there was a deep connection between him and this girl. When Emma stopped talking, she simply offered a small nod. He placed his hand on the table, as if wanting to say she didn't need to continue anymore. Have you ever met someone and immediately felt like you understood their pain? Sometimes our past prepares us to help others in ways we never expected. If you're connecting with this story, please subscribe. I share real stories about real courage every week. Later that night, Michael returned to his office, loosening his cream-colored suit tie, and turned on his computer. He submitted a request to search the administrative information of the Hayes family, as the name sounded strangely familiar. The system indicated it would take a few hours. He poured a cup of tea and sat quietly in the soft yellow light, his undercut hairstyle casting shadows in the lamplight. When the screen flickered with results, he leaned forward to read, David Hayes, bronze-level donor for Beacon House Foundation recurring donation. Contract, 2014 to 2022. He sat frozen, staring at the text. Next to it was the record of the last donation, signed 2 months before the accident. Michael leaned back in his chair, his cream suit jacket open, eyes fixed on the window frame. Outside, the hallway remained brightly lit. Emma was sitting at a drawing table in her sapphire blue dress, her braided hair catching the light, focused on coloring an old piece of paper. He approached, standing behind her without making a sound, his cream suit barely rustling. On the paper, the girl had drawn a little house with a sloped roof and illuminated windows. Michael used a yellow pencil to color that light, his hand in the cream sleeve trembling slightly, but the lines firm. Michael watched for a good while, then left without wanting to scare her. When he returned to his room, the night wind entered, bringing the scent of wet grass. He opened the wooden box, the gift from the children, and looked at the handwritten inscription. Thank you for giving us a safe foundation. The phrase suddenly had a different weight. He gently closed the lid and placed it next to the desk lamp. Outside in the hallway, the clock struck midnight. Beyond the gate, there were short footsteps. Then the faint sound of wind shaking Beacon House's sign. A figure stopped in front of the mailbox, slid a brown envelope inside,
and walked away. The morning at Beacon House began with the smell of toasted bread and children's laughter echoing from the dining room. Morning sunlight filtered through the window, casting a pale yellow stripe on Michael's desk as he adjusted his cream-colored suit jacket. He held the brown envelope that had been delivered. The blue ink on the outside was slightly smudged by the night's dew. Only the words were clearly legible. Regarding the estate of Mr. David Hayes, father of Emma. What do you think is in that envelope? Sometimes the past has a way of catching up with the present in the most unexpected ways. Drop your guess in the comments. Michael opened the envelope carefully, pulling out a stack of folded papers, a copy of a will with a red notarial seal and the signature of a local law firm. He sat down, his cream suit catching the morning light illuminating his face. Every line of text on the paper seemingly heavier than the weight of the numbers. The entire estate, valued at $300,000, including the house, savings account, and life insurance, was to be transferred to his daughter, Emma Hayes, when she turned 12. If, for any reason, Emma could not claim her inheritance, all property would be donated to the Beacon House Foundation. Michael set the paper down, his 2 fingers in cream sleeves tapping gently on the desk's surface. A wave of feelings, both strange and familiar, washed over him. He looked up toward the window where Emma was sitting in her sapphire blue dress, her braided brown hair shining in the sunlight, drawing with the other children. Suddenly he recognized the strange twist of fate that connected their 2 lives. The girl he rescued was the daughter of his former benefactor, the man who had helped Beacon House Foundation during a difficult period. Now he was gone, and his surviving daughter was being protected by Michael himself. He called Sandra, his assistant who had been with the center for 10 years, to the office. She brought a cup of hot tea, looking at him with concern, noticing his thoughtful expression as he sat in his cream suit. Sandra examined the document, nodded, and placed the copy of the will in a separate file in the safe. Michael handed her the paper, saying quietly, "We need to keep this secret. If Margaret finds out, she'd be here in the blink of an eye. I'll lock it up. Only we 2 will know about this," Sandra said. Michael simply responded softly, "Good. For now, let's let the girl have some peace." Meanwhile, across town, Jake sat in a small coffee shop, his signed resignation letter in front of him. He was still deeply concerned about the incident at the restaurant. His former colleagues texted him, mentioning that Margaret often stopped by, having private conversations with Howard Pierce, the McDonald's franchise owner, and seemed to be preparing to reclaim her position. Jake sat still, staring at his coffee cup. An uneasy feeling rose within him. He knew Margaret was cunning enough to manipulate things in her favor. Howard Pierce was a powerful figure. He owned 4 McDonald's locations in the area, had close ties with the local council, and was notoriously cheap but sharp. Margaret had worked for him for over 10 years, and they were close enough that many rumored their relationship went beyond business. It wouldn't be difficult for her to convince Howard that she was the victim of a smear campaign. In Howard's office that afternoon, Margaret sat across from him. Meticulously dressed in dark clothing, her voice level but her eyes sharp as a blade. "That man took my stepdaughter without any legal paperwork. The media coverage is all in his favor. If we let this slide, your reputation and the entire chains will be affected." Howard nodded, rubbing his chin. "I understand. I'll speak with the media side. I'll handle it in a way that benefits us more." She offered a thin smile, knowing she had just entangled Howard in this game. "Are you starting to see how people manipulate situations for their own gain? This is where the story gets even more intense. If you're still with me, hit that like button. It lets me know you want to see how this all plays out." In Howard's office that afternoon, Margaret sat across from him. Meticulously dressed in dark clothing, her voice level but her eyes sharp as a blade. "That man took my stepdaughter without any legal paperwork. The media coverage is all in his favor. If we let this slide, your reputation and the entire chains will be affected." Howard nodded, rubbing his chin. "I understand. I'll speak with the media side. I'll handle it in a way that benefits us more." She offered a thin smile, knowing she had just entangled Howard in this game. Are you starting to see how people manipulate situations for their own gain? This is where the story gets even more intense. If you're still with me, hit that like button. It lets me know you want to see how this all plays out. Maya turned the watch over curiously, noticing a small slot on the back. She gently used her nail to open it, and a small piece of paper fell out. Michael was walking down the hallway in his cream-colored suit, his undercut hairstyle neat as always, when he heard Maya shout. He entered the room and saw the two girls sitting cross-legged on the floor, Emma in her sapphire blue dress, Maya beside her, eyes wide open. Emma held the paper, her hand trembling. He sat down, his cream suit folding gracefully, took the delicate yellowed paper, and slowly unfolded it. Shaky handwriting from an older person was revealed. If you're reading this, it means I'm no longer there. Trust good people. If you're afraid, look for the place with the light. Beacon House. The room fell into silence. Emma looked at the paper, her braided hair falling forward, her sapphire dress rustling as she moved, her lips trembling. Maya grabbed her friend's hand, and Michael just watched silently, saying nothing. He folded the paper and placed it back in the girl's palm. Keep this. Your father believed you would find this place. Emma felt tears falling onto her sapphire blue dress. But the corners of her mouth curved slightly upward. That night, after everyone was asleep, Michael sat in his office. His cream suit jacket draped over the chair back, the yellow light illuminating piles of files. He read the will, reread the letter, and then sighed softly. This girl's fate seemed to close a full circle with his own life. He thought about filing for formal adoption to protect her from all the lurking dangers out there. But that same night, in a bar downtown, Margaret and Howard sat at a secluded table. A man in a dark suit, a former employee of Hayes' law firm, had just handed them a stack of documents. Here's a copy of the original documents. I just want peace, so please don't mention my name. Howard smiled, pulling out a thick envelope and handing it to him. Margaret opened the documents, scanning them, her eyes gleaming at the figure. $300,000. If the girl doesn't claim it, everything goes to Beacon House Foundation, she said slowly. And that man is the foundation's director. Howard leaned back in his chair with a slight mocking smile on his face. So all we need to do is get the girl back to you. After that, everything will be much simpler. If you could warn Michael right now, what would you tell him? The danger is closing in and he doesn't even know it yet. Comment below with your warning. The Monday morning at Beacon House's gate was no longer peaceful. A group of people stood outside, holding hastily written signs. We demand operational transparency. Don't use children to raise funds. The shouts mixed with car horns, a chaotic sound cutting through the warm atmosphere of the house. The children pressed curiously against the windows to look. While Sandra quickly drew the curtains, Michael stepped onto the porch in his cream-colored tailored suit, his undercut hairstyle immaculate despite the early hour, looking at the crowd outside the gate with a tense expression. In the distance, several reporters held cameras, focusing on the property. The center security guards tried to maintain order, but the wave of public opinion had arrived sooner than he'd anticipated. Sandra approached, handing him his phone open to a live news broadcast. An image of Howard standing in a luxurious conference room, the logo of the McDonald's chain he owned visible behind him. Margaret sat beside him, wearing a light-colored coat, her face meticulously made up, her eyes tearful captured in close-up. We don't want a media war, Marta said, clutching a tissue. I'm just a regretful mother. They took my daughter from me and haven't allowed me to see her. Howard nodded slightly, adding, We respect Mr. Thornton, but all charitable organizations must be transparent. If there's nothing wrong, why refuse to let the public know the truth? Do you believe what you see on TV, or do you question the narrative? In today's world, the truth isn't always what it seems. Drop a comment telling me how you spot manipulation in the media. Sandra turned off the video and put the phone on the desk. They're manipulating the narrative. Horacio planned this from the beginning. Michael remained silent, only nodding weakly. He understood Howard's type, a man who wanted others to fall without having to fight himself. That afternoon, Michael called an urgent meeting in the second-floor office. Sandra sat beside him, facing Marco Daran, a pro bono attorney who had returned to help Beacon House. Marco was about 30 years old, tall with a serious face. He was one of the first children the center had taken in, and now specialized in family law. Howard is applying pressure through public opinion, Marco said, flipping through files. His goal is to force us into defense mode, making the public suspicious before the lawsuit even begins. Margaret will file a custody petition for Emma within the next 2 weeks. To counter, we need clear evidence of Margaret's past abuse. Sandra intervened. Jake mentioned the security camera footage from McDonald's. If we still have a copy, that will be the decisive evidence. Michael nodded. Contact him. I'll handle the social witnesses and the doctor's medical report. That same night, Jake returned the call. He now worked for a private security company, his voice on the phone tinged with stress. I still have a copy of the video, Mr. Thornton. But Howard had someone manipulate and erase the original hard drive at the location. They want to make sure no one can confirm that happened. Do you still have the backup? Michael asked quickly, adjusting his cream suit jacket as he leaned forward. Yes, I saved it on a USB drive kept in a safe place. But it needs to be legalized before submission, or the court will argue the evidence was tampered with. If you've ever had to fight for what's right, you know how critical evidence can be. Have you ever witnessed someone trying to destroy the truth? Share your experience below. Your story might help someone else find courage. Hearing this, Marco immediately proposed meeting with Jake the next morning. They needed to convert the video into a legally verified and authenticated copy through a forensic technology agency. Only then would the court accept it. The team began dividing tasks. No one spoke a word more than necessary, only the sound of pens scratching paper, and the tick-tock of the clock, while Michael's team worked to protect the center. Across town, Margaret was initiating a new maneuver. She hired a young woman named Rebecca, a temporary employee, brought to Beacon House through a seasonal support agency. Rebecca was clever, spoke softly, and quickly won everyone's favor. Sandra even praised her as careful and genuinely caring with the children. But no one knew that Rebecca was collecting double her salary from Margaret to observe and report the situation. She often brought cookies and candy for the children, especially for Emma. She told Emma stories about a mother who always missed her daughter, deeply regretting what happened. Each time she mentioned it, Rebecca gently touched Emma's braided brown hair, whispering, "Your mother just wants to hold you one more time." Initially, Emma in her sapphire blue dress avoided the conversation, but the words slowly seeped into her mind. She became quieter, less talkative. When Michael in his cream suit asked, she simply smiled and said, "I'm just a little tired." One afternoon, Rebecca took Emma to the back courtyard where the sunlight was fading and the air was calm. Emma pulled out a photograph from her pocket, a photo of her as a small child with her father. On the back of the photo was neat handwriting. "Come home. Your mother is waiting." Think about how easily a child's mind can be manipulated by someone they trust. What would you do if you discovered someone was trying to poison a child's thoughts? Let me know in the comments. Rebecca slid the photo into Emma's hand, her sapphire dress rustling as she moved. "Your mother sent this. She just wants you to know she's still here." Emma froze, her fingers trembling as they touched the photo. In her young mind, the image of her father, the kind father who always patted her head each morning, flashed, followed by Margaret's cold face in the restaurant. The contradictory emotions left her silent. By the time Michael noticed, Rebecca had disappeared. She resigned that very day, and no one knew where she went. Sandra checked her locker, finding only folded uniforms and an empty envelope. Emma sat on the steps in her bright sapphire blue dress, the photo still in her hand. Her braided hair catching the evening light, her eyes tearful. Michael approached in his cream-colored suit, sitting gently beside her. He didn't ask questions, just put his hand on her small shoulder, feeling her rapid breathing. "Do you miss your dad?" he asked after a moment. Emma nodded softly, her voice choked. I don't know if Mom is really sorry, but I dreamed that Dad told me not to go.
Michael looked into the distance, the evening wind making him feel something inside was breaking.
You don't have to trust anyone. Just trust what you see today. That night, after Emma fell asleep, Sandra entered the office.
They're escalating, she said, putting a file on the desk.
Howard sent a letter to a major television channel, preparing to air a special report about the stolen child's mother. At the same time, they're suing the Center for Invasion of Privacy.
Marco sat across, tapping the file lightly with his fingers.
If we let them get ahead, we'll only be able to react.
I think we should file a counter lawsuit proactively,
demanding an investigation into the spread of false information and media pressure.
Have you ever felt like the whole world was against you,
but you knew you were doing the right thing?
That's where Michael is right now.
If this story is resonating with you, please subscribe. These real-life courage stories need to be heard.
Michael immediately agreed. Do it. Everyone wants to turn this into a game of public opinion, so we'll win with the truth. Outside, the wind grew stronger, and Beacon House's place of light sign swayed gently.
Jake sent a final message of the day. The backup video copy is complete. I'll bring it tomorrow morning.
Late that night, Michael left his office in his cream suit, walking slowly down the quiet hallway.
The faint yellow hallway light cast his long shadow on the wall.
Passing the dormitory area, he stopped.
Emma was sitting by the window in her sapphire blue dress, the light illuminating her small face, still holding the photo of her father.
Her eyes red from crying. Michael didn't say anything, simply stood there watching her for a long time.
Something ignited inside him.
Not anger, but determination.
He understood that this fight was no longer just about protecting the center's reputation.
It was about protecting a girl and the part of his own past he thought he'd forgotten. The wind blew softly that night, carrying the damp smell of rain.
He turned, clenched his fists in his cream suit pockets, and returned to his office. Early the next morning,
before sunlight could peek through the trees, Marco received a summons from the district court. The envelope bore a red seal, the civil court stamp prominent in the corner. He read it quickly, then picked up the phone to call Michael. Temporary injunction hearing. They filed it last night.
The plaintiff is Howard Pierce on behalf of Margaret Wilson.
On the other end of the line, Michael, already dressed in his cream suit with his undercut hairstyle freshly groomed, remained silent for a few seconds. When? Tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock.
They're accusing the center of illegal detention of a minor.
What would you do if you had less than 24 hours to prepare for the most important fight of your life? Michael is about to face his biggest challenge. Drop a comment with your strategy. In Beacon House's office, the atmosphere was dense.
Sandra reorganized files, and Marco packed all necessary documents.
Michael stood by the window in his cream-colored suit, the light illuminating the deep lines around his eyes.
He knew this wasn't just a hearing. It was the only opportunity to reveal the truth.
We're going, he said softly.
We're going to show them the light they tried to hide. All afternoon, his team worked tirelessly to prepare.
Sandra double-checked Emma's medical records, confirmation of malnutrition, the initial treating physician's statement, and the social services agency record. Marco drafted the legal arguments, preparing the legalized copy of Jake's video.
Everything was carefully sealed in a black briefcase, securely fastened.
Meanwhile, across town, Margaret continued her performance. She appeared on local television, her eyes red, clutching Emma's photograph.
I just want to see my girl.
They don't understand the feeling of a mother who's lost her daughter. Howard sat beside her in an expensive dark suit, feigning consolation,
occasionally interjecting, "All we're asking for is justice."
The media was divided.
One side praised Beacon House. The other raised questions.
On social media, dozens of anonymous accounts simultaneously posted attacks on the center,
accusing it of using children to raise funds.
Sandra tracked the source, discovering they all led to the same media company, a subsidiary of Howard's. He controls the entire narrative, Sandra said, putting the printed file on the desk.
Not just the press but also social media channels. Michael looked at the list, his voice low.
It's a dirty game.
But light will break through eventually.
That night, Jake brought the USB drive to the center. He had carefully copied the original into 3 different backups, stored in 3 separate locations. If Howard finds out about this, they'll try to destroy it. He said, do you see how one person's courage can change everything? Jake risked his career and safety to preserve the truth.
When was the last time you stood up for what was right, even when it was dangerous?
Share your story below.
Marco took it, checking the seal carefully.
We'll only present it to the court when it's time for evidence submission. No one outside of us 3 should know about it. Emma couldn't sleep that night.
She heard the staff saying that tomorrow someone would ask questions about her mother. In the young girl's mind, that meant being separated again.
She sat by the window in her sapphire blue dress, her braided brown hair loose, hugging her worn teddy bear. Michael passed by, seeing the light in her room still on. He entered and sat on the edge of her bed in his cream suit, the fabric rustling softly. Can't sleep?
The girl shook her head. Tomorrow they're going to ask me about my mother, right?
Yes, but you don't have to worry.
Just say what you remember, not what others want to hear.
Emma was silent for a moment, then whispered, If I say something wrong, will they take me away?
Michael placed his hand on her hair, his voice soft as the wind.
No one can take you when you're where you belong.
Sometimes good people have to walk through darkness to find the light.
Do you understand? Emma nodded, her eyes slowly closing. He stayed for a moment longer, watching her steady breathing, his heart filled with a mixture of sadness and determination. The next morning, the city was blurred by cold fog. The small civil courthouse was located on the corner of the street, with a row of reporters waiting outside. Cameras pointed at the entrance, lights flashing continuously. When Michael, Marco,
and Sandra got out of the car.
Michael in his distinctive cream-colored tailored suit with perfect undercut hairstyle. The murmur of voices echoed through the hallway. Jake walked behind, carrying the bag with the USB drive, his eyes vigilant. On the other side,
Margaret and Howard appeared in expensive outfits, escorted by a film crew.
Margaret offered a weak smile, entering as if she were the victim summoned by justice.
Her attorney, a gray-haired man in a gray suit, approached the judge with an air of excessive confidence. If you were in that courtroom, whose side would you believe before seeing the evidence? Our first impressions can be so wrong.
Comment below with your honest answer.
In the small courtroom, the atmosphere was heavy. The judge, a serious middle-aged woman, sat in the center, her sharp eyes scanning everyone.
We're here to temporarily determine custody of the minor Emma Hayes. I want all parties to remain composed. Howard stood first, his voice clear and well-rehearsed. Your Honor, Beacon House Center is illegally detaining a minor.
They're exploiting the child's image to solicit donations.
Here's a series of articles proving this, along with testimony from the child's biological stepmother, Margaret Wilson. He presented a thick file, placing it firmly on the table.
Margaret feigned shedding a tear, gently dabbing her eye with a tissue.
I don't want to confront anyone.
I just want my daughter back.
Marco requested permission to speak.
He opened his file, his voice decided.
Your Honor, Beacon House is not detaining anyone. Emma Hayes was temporarily transferred by social services for medical treatment and care. Here are the medical records confirming her state of malnutrition and signs of prolonged starvation.
The judge accepted the file, scanned it quickly, and nodded.
Do you have any visual evidence?
Marco looked at Michael in his cream suit, then turned to Jake.
Your Honor,
we request permission to present a piece of supplementary evidence, a security camera, recording from the McDonald's where the initial incident occurred.
Howard's side immediately objected. Objection.
This video is not authenticated and is potentially altered.
Marco remained calm.
This is an official copy, digitally certified and verified to match the time of the event. We request permission to show it.
The judge nodded. Granted.
This is it, the moment of truth.
Have you ever watched someone's lies unravel right before your eyes? Stay with me. You won't believe what happens next.
If you're on the edge of your seat, hit that like button. The lights in the room dimmed. The large screen flickered to life.
The image appeared, the McDonald's on the highway, a rainy afternoon. A small fragile girl in a faded jacket covering a sapphire blue dress, huddled near the counter. Margaret approached, roughly pulling the child's arm toward the back.
The sound of crying was clearly audible, along with the noise of something breaking.
Michael appeared in the frame, running forward, pulling the girl away from the woman. The courtroom fell silence, so quiet that the creak of paper was clearly audible. Some reporters looked at each other, stunned. Margaret bowed her head, her face pale. Howard sat rigidly, his hands gripping his pen tightly. The judge finished watching, looked up and spoke slowly. "Miss Wilson, do you have anything to say?" Margaret stuttered, trying to find words, but no one in the room still believed her fabricated tearful eyes. Howard turned to his attorney, his lips pressed tightly, his face tense as a wire.
Michael in his cream suit said nothing, simply bowed his head,
his hand resting gently on the armrest where Emma would have sat if she were present. The judge raised her gaze.
"The footage has been verified.
We cannot consider this a misunderstanding."
Her gaze settled on Margaret. "The actions in the video are sufficient to prove the lack of a safe living environment that you created."
Margaret looked up, attempting to recover.
"I was just trying to teach her a lesson."
She lied, tried to take food.
"People don't understand. I only wanted her to turn out right."
Her voice trembled, not from remorse, but from fear.
The entire room remained silent. Jake stood, hands clasped in front of him, his eyes resolute. "I confirm the video is authentic. I worked at that location and saw everything. There was no fabrication."
He looked directly at Margaret. At that moment, the girl was only asking for a piece of pie.
When the truth finally comes out, it's like watching the sun break through storm clouds.
Have you ever been vindicated after being wrongly accused?
That feeling of justice is what we're witnessing right now.
Comment if you're feeling this moment.
The simple statement made many in the room lower their gaze.
Marco presented additional confirmation records from the Social Services Agency, combined with medical examination results.
The judge read carefully, then put her pen on the table.
No one dared to speak. She announced slowly, after reviewing all evidence and testimony, the court rules to revoke Margaret Wilson's guardianship over the minor Emma Hayes. Temporary custody will continue to rest with Beacon House Center until a final ruling is reached.
A murmur spread through the room.
A reporter stood up, only to be quickly directed to sit down by a security officer.
The judge continued, her voice uniform.
The court also orders an independent investigation into alleged misconduct within Mr.
Howard Pierce's establishment system, specifically regarding obstruction of justice and information manipulation.
Howard slumped, his hand trembling slightly, his fingers unconsciously tapping the table. Margaret stepped back, her eyes tightly shut, murmuring something no one could clearly hear. Michael in his cream-colored suit said not a word, simply bowed his head slightly in gratitude. When they exited the courthouse, the hallway was crowded.
Reporters took photos, flashes firing continuously.
But within the noisy crowd, Michael only heard one thing in his mind, Emma's small voice asking, "Will they take me away?" Now he had the answer. Outside, the courthouse district court sign stood tall under the sun. Michael stopped in his cream suit, his undercut hairstyle gleaming in the bright light, and took a deep breath. Marco clapped him on the shoulder. "We did it." "No," Michael said quietly. "The truth did it." On the drive back to the center, the car drove slowly along the suburban road. Michael sat in the back, his cream suit jacket finally relaxed, looking out at the passing landscape. His phone buzzed with hundreds of messages: congratulations, interview requests, donation offers. He ignored them all. This victory isn't about fame or recognition, it's about one little girl finally being safe. Have you ever fought for something bigger than yourself?
That's what real heroism looks like.
If this story moved you, please share it. Someone else needs to hear this today. All that mattered was getting back to Beacon House, back to Emma in her sapphire blue dress with her braided brown hair, and telling her, "You're staying. You're home." Sandra was already at the center when they arrived, standing at the gate with Emma beside her. The little girl wore her bright sapphire blue dress, her braided brown hair neatly arranged, holding Maya's hand. When she saw Michael's car, her eyes widened. Michael got out in his cream suit, walked toward her slowly, and knelt down so he was at her eye level. Emma's lips trembled. "Do I have to go back?" she whispered, her small hands clutching her sapphire dress. Michael shook his head, placing both hands gently on her shoulders, his cream suit sleeves contrasting beautifully with her blue dress. "No, sweetheart. You're staying right here. This is your home now." Emma's face crumpled, and she threw her arms around his neck, sobbing into his cream-colored shoulder. He wrapped his arms around her, feeling her small body shake with relief. Around them, the other children cheered. Maya jumped up and down. Sandra wiped her eyes. And for the first time in months, Michael felt something he thought he'd lost forever, the feeling of being exactly where he belonged. Time passed quietly, like the city was sinking into the slow breath of winter. Snow fell earlier than usual, white flakes covering Beacon House's courtyard, the roof and windows making the place look like a Christmas painting drawn from memories. Inside, the children were busy hanging lights and sticking colorful paper on the walls. The sound of scissors cutting and laughter echoed through the hallways. Sandra supervised the older group assembling the Christmas tree, while the younger group, including Emma in her bright sapphire blue dress with her braided brown hair, and Maya, had the task of writing Christmas cards. On a small red card, Emma carefully wrote each letter. "Thank you for giving me a safe foundation." When she finished, she looked out the window. Outside, the snow continued falling, thick and silent. The light illuminated her face, making Michael, standing in the distance in his cream-colored suit with his undercut hairstyle, stop suddenly. Emma had changed so much. She was sociable, did well in school, and laughed often. But every time someone mentioned family, her smile froze for a fleeting moment. Michael noticed this but didn't rush to intervene. He understood that some wounds couldn't be healed with words, only with patience and love. One weekend afternoon, when everyone was busy decorating, he found Emma sitting alone by a second-floor window. Beside her was the photo of her father and the broken watch she always kept close. Outside, snow fell intensely, flakes touching the window glass and dissolving into drops. Michael in his cream suit approached and sat beside her without saying anything, just watched the world outside with her in silence. After a while, Emma asked softly, "Mr. Michael, why does snow fall so quietly?" He thought for a moment and responded, "Because it's used to falling without being afraid of melting." She lowered her head, her voice quieting. "Like my dad? Can you remember the moment you realized someone you loved was never coming back?" Emma's learning to let go while holding on to the love. If you've lost someone, drop a heart emoji below. You're not alone in this journey. He looked at her, his eyes soft. "Maybe, but your father hasn't gone completely. He's just letting you find your own light." Emma said nothing more, but her small hand gently touched his, like a tacit thank you. From that day on, Michael began spending more time at the center. He cooked with the children, taught them to arrange flowers and bake cookies. In the evenings, he sat at the long dining table, listening to the children tell stories about school, occasionally laughing. Emma in her sapphire blue dress often sat beside him, frequently making him extra hot chocolate and patiently waiting for him to try it. Every time the girl smiled, Michael saw his own childhood reflected, the orphaned boy who once sat in a cold kitchen wishing someone would ask, "Are you okay today?" That feeling made his heart both warm and heavy. One afternoon, Sandra entered his office carrying a stack of files. "Have you thought about formally adopting Emma?" she asked gently, as if afraid to break the peace. Michael paused, looking at the photo on the wall, an image of the children during the center's opening ceremony. "I'm afraid she's not ready," he said softly. Sandra smiled. "Perhaps it's you who's not ready." That night he tried to read the files but couldn't concentrate. Every line blurred under the desk lamp. Since Emma arrived, his life had changed. She wasn't just a responsibility. She was the missing piece of peace he'd lost. A week later, The center celebrated its winter festival. The entire building glowed with yellow light chains, and a large Christmas tree stood in the courtyard. The aroma of gingerbread and hot chocolate filled the air. Neighbors, benefactors, and families who had been helped by the center attended by evening. Emma and Maya performed a Christmas carol. The two girls wore white dresses, Emma's white dress elegant over her signature sapphire blue dress underneath, standing on the small stage built with painted wooden boxes. Their voices were clear and crisp, like light reflecting on snow. What's your favorite holiday memory? Sometimes the simplest moments create the deepest joy. Share your memory in the comments. I love hearing about the moments that made you who you are today. When the song reached its end, the room fell silent. Then it erupted in applause. Michael found himself jumping up, clapping for some reason he couldn't stay seated. Emma's eyes searched for him in the crowd, and she smiled, the first complete smile since arriving at Beacon House. After the ceremony, Emma ran and hugged him tightly in his cream-colored suit, her breath rapid from running and excitement. "I hope you stay with me forever," she whispered, her voice mixing with the lingering Christmas music. Michael froze, then gently squeezed her shoulder. "I hope so too." That night, snow covered the porch. Christmas lights flickered outside the window, reflecting on his desk. Michael sat alone in his office in his cream suit, facing an old cabinet drawer. He opened it and took out Emma's father's will, the document that had caused so much turmoil. The father's handwriting was still clear. "If she doesn't claim it, the assets go to Beacon House." Michael remained silent for a long moment, remembering the first day he met Emma, the skinny girl trembling in her worn jacket covering her sapphire blue dress, and how she had grabbed his hand as if clinging to a last bit of remaining light. Now she was different. And so was he. He picked up a pen and opened a new envelope. Inside, he placed the old will, then added a single line. "Emma, the future belongs to you." He sealed it and placed it on the desk next to the drawing Emma had given him, the image of two people standing under a brightly lit roof. Outside, the children's laughter echoed. Emma in her sapphire blue dress was singing with Maya, holding the small wooden box, the first gift he'd given her. She spun under the lights, her braided brown hair illuminated with a golden glow. Her singing mixing with the wind, spreading through the window, seeping into the room where he sat. If you've ever made a decision that changed someone's life forever, you know the weight Michael's carrying right now. This is what love looks like, choosing someone else's future over your own comfort. Hit subscribe if you believe in this kind of love. Michael leaned back in his chair, his eyes slightly closed. In that song, he heard something profound, not just joy, but a promise. A promise that from now on, they were no longer two lost souls, but a small family keeping each other warm through the remaining winters. Spring arrived gently, like a delicate sigh after the long winter months. The garden behind Beacon House was vibrant with tulips of all colors, pink, yellow, and purple petals mixed in the early sun, reflecting on the freshly washed, gleaming windows. The aroma of damp earth and flowers filled the air, making the place feel like a small world separated from life's noise outside. The children played happily in the courtyard. Maya chased a red ball while Emma in her sapphire blue dress laughed brilliantly, her braided brown hair flying with the spring breeze. That laughter spread through the entire house, reaching the office where Michael in his cream-colored suit with his perfectly groomed undercut hairstyle was organizing documents. He paused, listening. It had been a long time since his heart had felt so calm. Since the court ruling, Michael had almost completely withdrawn from his business activities. He handed the company to a younger team, focusing instead on community projects. Every morning, he walked the center's grounds in his cream suit, greeting each child, visiting the art room to see Emma and her friends draw, and planning the new therapeutic garden with Sandra. That slow lifestyle felt strange at first, but gradually became a natural part of him. Everyone who worked with him noticed the change. His eyes were kinder, his voice deeper but softer. Emma grew fast, lively, and confident. She and Maya were chosen to participate in the center's new mural project, a 10-meter-long fresco, recreating the journey from darkness to light. Every day after school, the two girls in their distinctive dresses, Emma's sapphire blue, Maya's cheerful yellow, spent hours beside the white wall. Their hands stained with paint, their shirts splattered with color. Laughing constantly. Michael in his cream suit often sat nearby, reading the newspaper while occasionally watching, sometimes offering a gentle suggestion. That spot needs a little more yellow to make the sun brighter. Emma would turn around and stick out her tongue. You're criticizing my painting again, Mr. Thornton. Have you ever watched a child heal right before your eyes? It's like watching a flower bloom after winter. Emma's transformation reminds us that love really does conquer trauma. Comment below if you've witnessed this kind of miracle. She'd grown accustomed to calling him Mr. Michael with a familiar tone, sometimes playful, as if there was no longer any distance between them. Every morning when he entered his office, she often poked her head through the door and asked, "Do we have anything new today?" And he always responded, "Yes, but you have to finish your breakfast first." One afternoon, while they were organizing the center's old storage room together, Emma discovered a dusty wooden box in the corner. Inside were photographs of Beacon House from its early years when it only had a few small rooms, the faces of unnamed small children, and a much younger Michael in a simple suit. Emma sat on the floor in her sapphire blue dress, flipping through the photos. When she came to an image of young Michael, she stopped, her eyes focused. You were one of the children here too, weren't you?
The question didn't require an answer.
Michael in his cream suit only nodded gently. He didn't need to say anything more because he saw the understanding in her eyes. From that day on, Emma seemed to look at him differently, not just as a rescuer, but as a companion. Someone who understood her fear without having to ask. She understood why he was always patient, why he never gave up on any child at Beacon House. One night, while the two girls drew in their room, Maya asked suddenly, "Do you ever think Mr. Michael will adopt you formally?" Emma froze, her pencil stopping on the paper. After a moment, she smiled, her voice calm but firm. "I think he's already my father. He just hasn't said it yet." And that phrase slipped through the crack in the door and reached Michael in his cream suit, standing in the hallway, about to enter. But he stopped. He turned away, his heart beating slower, heavier. Perhaps he too was waiting for something. A clear moment between the two that both were afraid to approach. Think about the people in your life who became family without sharing your blood. Sometimes the strongest bonds aren't biological, they're chosen. Who's your chosen family? Share their name below, they deserve to be celebrated. The days passed in peace. Spring brought soft sunlight and long afternoons filled with laughter. But one persistent concern remained in Michael's heart. He knew that if he adopted Emma, she would lose her father's inheritance, the money the man had saved his entire life, along with the small house he'd built for his daughter. Man had saved his entire life, along with the small house he'd built for his daughter. One night, he shared his dilemma with Sandra and Marco. Sandra shook her head, her voice soft. "Some things are more important than money." Marco added, "The girl needs a real home, not a legacy on paper. What comes from affection will find a way to survive legally. Let her know you want to stay not out of obligation, but out of love." Their words kept Michael awake all night. He sat in his office in his cream suit, the desk lamp illuminating his face, the blank white paper before him still empty. Outside, the spring rain fell lightly, the aroma of earth and young grass floating through the window. The next morning, Emma sat at the drawing table in her sapphire blue dress, her braided brown hair catching the morning light, her hands covered with paint, giving the finishing touches to the mural. Michael in his cream suit approached, holding a new envelope. He placed it in front of her, his voice soft. "Take a look at this." Emma opened the envelope. Inside were the adoption papers, clearly showing both their names. She read slowly, line by line, her lips trembling slightly. When she reached the part that said, "Legal guardian, Michael Thornton," tears began to fall. She looked up, her eyes shining. You really want this?" Michael nodded, his hand gently squeezing her shoulder.
his cream suit sleeve touching her sapphire dress. I don't need another child in the center. I just need you in this house. Emma's face crumpled, and she threw herself into his arms, sobbing into his cream-colored suit. He wrapped his arms around her small frame in the sapphire blue dress, feeling her body shake with relief and joy. Around them, the other children who'd been watching began to cheer. Maya jumped up and down, clapping. Sandra wiped her eyes from the doorway, and Michael closed his eyes. Holding this little girl who had somehow become his entire world. This is what redemption looks like. Two broken souls finding wholeness in each other. If you're crying right now, you're not alone. Drop a comment telling me what this moment means to you. Your words matter. 1 year later, Beacon House was almost unrecognizable. The new building was painted beige with a red tile roof that stood out against the green trees. In front of the gate, a large sign read, "Welcome Home," glowing brightly under yellow lights every night. Laughter and children's calls echoed throughout the courtyard, transmitting the warm feeling of a true home. Michael's adoption ceremony was simple but filled with love. Emma wore a white dress over her signature sapphire blue dress underneath, her braided brown hair adorned with small white flowers, her face radiant. She officially took the surname Thornton, the name of the man who had rescued her from the shadows and brought her to the light, Michael. In his finest cream-colored tailored suit with his undercut hairstyle impeccably groomed, Marco, Sandra, Jake, and all the children from the center were present. When Michael finished signing the paper, the room erupted in applause. Emma held the microphone, her voice slightly trembling. Thank you all. Today I found the brightly lit home my father wrote about in his letter. Here I am loved, I am living, and I'm taught to believe that tomorrow always has light. Michael stood speechless, remembering that afternoon a year ago, when he slammed open the McDonald's bathroom door and saw the small girl trembling in the corner in her faded sapphire blue dress. That image now felt like a distant dream, but every time he remembered it, his eyes still filled with tears. Margaret disappeared from the city, and Howard quietly retired from the business world. Their story concluded, leaving behind a lesson about greed, redemption, and the value of human generosity. In the new wing today, Emma started a small art class for newly arrived children. The first painting she completed hung right in the center's living room, a brightly lit house with an image of two people holding hands and smiling inside. By night, Michael sat in his office in his cream suit, looking out the window. Outside, Emma in her sapphire blue dress with her braided brown hair was helping Maya hang lights for the next day's ceremony. The light reflected in her hair like sunlight finding its way to his heart. Before I let you go, I want to ask, what did this story teach you about second chances? Michael and Emma both got theirs. Maybe you need one too. Share your thoughts below. If you haven't already, please subscribe. These stories need to reach people who need hope. When Emma entered, she smiled. I thought you were still working. Michael in his cream suit shook his head softly. No, I was just remembering the first time I met you. She approached in her sapphire dress, placing the small wooden box engraved with the words, "Thank you for giving us a safe foundation" on his desk. I'm giving it back to you now because I already have a home. Thank you. Michael looked at the gift, his hand trembling slightly in his cream sleeve. He understood that this journey hadn't just saved a small girl, it had rescued his own heart. Outside, the courtyard lights turned on, illuminating the wall with a new inscription, Beacon House, where children learn to trust tomorrow. Michael stood beside Emma in his cream suit. She in her sapphire blue dress, under the brightly lit doorway. Laughter echoed throughout the courtyard, mixing with the warm light of the night, and the story concluded in the perfect peace of those who had found each other. So, how do you feel after hearing this story? Who impressed you most? Was it Michael, who chose affection over abandonment, or Emma, the brave girl who dared to believe the world still had a place for her? Don't hesitate to share your thoughts in the comments section below. I'd love to know which action in the story moved you most, and which character you'll remember long after. Let's talk together about the beautiful things generosity can bring, even in life's darkest moments. What city are you watching this video from and what time is it? By the way, if you're enjoying my videos. I'd be so happy if you could subscribe to my channel and like this video. And remember, sometimes the person who saves you is the one who needed saving too. Thank you for being here. Thank you for believing that stories like this matter. And thank you for being the kind of person who stayed until the end. Until next time, keep looking for the light. It's always there, even in the darkest places. Good night, and sweet dreams.